The night the argument started, a glass shattered on the marble floor and every head in the restaurant turned at once. The billionaire's voice cut through the room before the waitress could even apologize. "Do you even know how much this suit costs?" he snapped, standing up so fast his chair slid backward. Emily froze for half a second, then bent down to pick up the broken glass. "I'm sorry, sir. It slipped." "Of course it slipped," he said loudly. "People who don't know what they're doing always say that." The restaurant went quiet. Conversations stopped. Even the pianist slowed his hands. Emily kept her voice calm. "I'll bring you another drink right away." He laughed, not amused, but sharp. "You think this is about the drink?" His friends at the table exchanged looks, half smiling, half uncomfortable. This place used to have standards," the billionaire continued. "Now they hire anyone who can carry a tray." Emily didn't answer. She picked up the last piece of glass and stood. "Sir, I'll clean this up and bring—" "Forget the drink," he cut in. "Just try not to ruin anything else tonight." A few people chuckled nervously. Emily nodded once and walked toward the bar, her face unreadable, her steps steady even though every eye followed her. Nobody in the restaurant knew that the quiet waitress they were watching had a PhD, and before the night ended she was going to make one of the richest men in the city wish he had never opened his mouth. Emily had been working at the restaurant for 3 months. She never talked much, never argued, never reacted when customers got rude. The other waiters used to joke that nothing could shake her. They didn't know she had spent years in lecture halls where professors tried to tear apart every sentence she said. After that, an angry customer didn't feel like much. She hadn't planned to be a waitress, not after finishing her doctorate, not after all the nights she stayed awake writing research papers nobody outside the academic world would ever read. But life had changed fast. Her mother got sick. Hospital bills started piling up. The university contract she was promised never came. One delay turned into another, and another, until she needed a job immediately, not a title. The restaurant paid weekly. That was enough. She returned to the table with a fresh glass of wine. "Your drink, sir." The billionaire didn't look at her. He was already talking again, loud enough for half the room to hear. I told them that investment was a mistake," he said, tapping the table. "But nobody listens until money disappears." One of his friends leaned forward. "You lost that much?" "Millions," the billionaire replied, "because some genius analyst wrote a report nobody understood." Another man laughed. "So the expert was wrong?" "The expert was an idiot," the billionaire said. "Too much theory, no real-world sense." Emily placed the glass in front of him carefully. She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Wait." She faced him again. "Yes, sir?" He looked at her like he had just remembered she existed. "You went to school?" he asked suddenly. She blinked once. "Yes, sir." "High school?" he said, smiling slightly. One of his friends smirked. Emily answered calmly. "More than that?" "Really?" he said. "Then tell me something. Why do people study for years and still end up serving food?" The table laughed quietly. Emily didn't react. "Would you like anything else, sir?" He leaned back. "Yeah, an answer." She hesitated, just for a second. "Sometimes life changes plans." He shook his head. "No. Sometimes people make bad choices." Emily said nothing. He picked up his glass, took a sip, then kept talking, not to her anymore, but loud enough for her to hear. "That analyst cost me $10 million. $10 million. Because of some academic nonsense about market cycles." Emily's hand tightened slightly around the tray. One of the men asked, "What was the report about?" "Something about historical crash patterns," the billionaire said. "Said the market would drop if we pushed too fast." "And you didn't listen?" "Why would I?" he replied. "I run companies, not classrooms." A few people at nearby tables were listening now. Emily turned to walk away again. "Hey, the billionaire said sharply. She stopped. You look like you understand English, he said. Tell me, if someone tells you a deal will fail but you know better, who do you trust? She looked at him for a long moment. Depends who did the research, she said quietly. His friends laughed again. You hear that? He said. The waitress has an opinion. I didn't mean... She started. No, he said, waving his hand. Go on. I'm curious now. What would you know about research? The room felt tighter. Even the pianist stopped playing completely. Emily could feel every eye on her, but her voice stayed steady. I know that sometimes the person who studies the problem sees things others don't. The billionaire smiled, but it wasn't friendly. And what makes you think you understand any of that? She hesitated again. Not because she didn't have an answer, but because she knew once she said it, the night would change. You asked, she said. He leaned forward. I did. She took a slow breath. I wrote my doctoral thesis on market collapse patterns, she said, including the one your company ignored last year. The words landed like a dropped plate. Nobody laughed. One of the men frowned. Wait, what? The billionaire stared at her, not smiling anymore. What did you just say? I said, Emily repeated calmly, I studied the same crash you're talking about, for 3 years. He shook his head once like he didn't believe what he heard. You? He said. Yes. Silence spread across the restaurant. One of his friends pulled out his phone. What was your name? Emily hesitated. Emily Carter. The man typed quickly, eyes moving across the screen. His expression changed. He looked up at the billionaire, then back at the phone, then at her again. You wrote this? He asked quietly. She nodded once. The billionaire grabbed the phone from him. His eyes moved across the screen, faster and faster until his jaw tightened. Nobody spoke. For the first time that night, he didn't have anything to say. He looked up at her slowly. If this is you, he said, his voice lower now. What are you doing here? Emily held the tray against her side. Working, she said. That's not an answer. It is for me. He stood up again, but this time not in anger. More like he didn't know what to do with himself. You're telling me, he said, that the report I ignored, the one that cost me millions, was written by you, and you're serving my table? Yes. One of the other customers whispered, loud enough to hear, Wow! The billionaire looked around, suddenly aware that the whole restaurant was watching him now, the same way they had watched her before. He exhaled slowly. Why? He asked. Emily's voice softened for the first time. My mother is in the hospital, she said. This job pays every week. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The billionaire looked at the floor, then at the table, then back at her. All the arrogance from earlier was gone. He started, then stopped. He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, and placed several bills on the table. More than the meal cost. Much more. Then he looked at her again. Yeah, I came in here thinking I was the smartest man in the room, he said quietly. No one made a sound. He continued, Turns out, I was just the loudest. Emily didn't smile. She just nodded once. He picked up his jacket, then paused. Dr. Carter, he said almost carefully this time, the world is strange. Yes, she replied. It is. He gave a small, embarrassed laugh, then walked toward the door without another word. The moment he left, the restaurant filled with whispers. Emily stood there for a second, then turned and walked back toward the kitchen like nothing had happened. And that night, everyone who saw it learned the same lesson. Never assume you know someone's story just because you see where they are standing. Some people are quiet not because they have nothing to say, but because they don't need to prove anything to anyone. If you enjoyed this story, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in that restaurant. Because sometimes the strongest voice in the room is the one that speaks last.